Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive. Today we're going to explore one person's journey to overcome a creative rut and the unexpected lessons he learned along the way. Our source material is a YouTube video titled "The Answer Is Not a Hut in the Woods."
Interesting title.
Right, and it was created by a writer who he was struggling with a serious case of writer's block.
I can definitely relate to
Oh
that.
yeah, we'll be exploring that contrast too, that allure of escaping to nature to find inspiration, but also that reality check that sometimes comes after.
Yeah, for sure.
So to kind of set the scene, this writer is in his early 30s, and he's poured his heart and soul into finishing this book, like achieved a level of success that many writers dream of, but instead of feeling, accomplished, he finds himself staring at a blank page, completely creatively paralyzed.
It's almost like that pressure, right? You finally get there and then it's like, what now?
Exactly. And he's also grappling with that feeling of, shouldn't I have accomplished more by now? Which adds another layer of pressure. So what does he do? He decides to run away, literally, like books a one-way ticket to New Zealand, fueled by that romantic notion of, finding solace, creative renewal in nature.
The classic escape to nature. It's a powerful idea.
It is. But as we'll see in this deep dive, it's not always that simple, just changing your location.
Right. Those internal struggles, they kind of follow us wherever we go.
They do.
Yeah.
So let's rewind a bit, Before his New Zealand adventure, he describes his first major creative rut hitting him at, like, the young age of 21.
Oh, wow. Young.
He had just finished reading works by these literary giant, think Margaret Atwood, Arthur C. Clarke, Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Big names, yeah.
Right. He was, like, completely blown away by their talent. And, it's interesting. He describes himself at that time feeling like a hygienically subversive dweeb. His words, not mine,
Huh?
compared to these, literary masters.
Yeah.
He had this dream of writing something truly great, but suddenly felt completely inadequate.
That's that comparison trap, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's so easy to feel small when you're looking at these, giants in your field.
totally. And he was really hard on himself, equating his writing with his self-worth. So feeling lost and creatively blocked, he decides to follow a path inspired by, the movie Into the Wild.
Oh, wow. So he heads to New Zealand.
He does, convinced that immersing himself in nature will, unlock his creative potential.
It's that idea that if we change our surroundings, maybe we can change ourselves.
Exactly. But, it doesn't always work out that way. And his New Zealand experience, it kind of highlights this. His adventure begins with him, working on a series of organic farms through a program called WO, Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms.
W Woofing, I've heard of that. It's a cool program.
It is. But his first farm placement, it turns out to be, well, less than idyllic.
Oh, no. What happened?
He ends up working for this cynical, misanthropic British couple who seem to, like, hate everything.
Oh, that's not great.
Including each other. Like, he jokingly compares their dynamic to new lovers, just with a lot more bitterness and resentment. He talks about how they, criticized him for things like treating the animals too nicely, and they even tried to, like, recruit him into their, post-apocalyptic utopia.
Oh, wow. Hardcore.
Which he politely declined. So to escape, like, the misery of this first farm placement, he contacts a woman who rents out a yurt. It's like in a remote part of the country.
So he's going full into the wild now. A yurt in the wilderness.
Right. He stocks up on books, boards a bus, and heads off to, like, his solitary yurt in the middle of nowhere.
I can picture it. Tiny yurt, vast landscapes. Peaceful. Right.
It does sound peaceful, and for a while he seems to, find some solace in that solitude. He spends his days wandering around naked.
Wait, naked.
Yeah, naked. Reading, writing, just soaking in, the tranquility of nature. But then, as he puts it, the novelty wore off, and I noticed I was going slightly insane.
Makes sense. That honeymoon phase of any escape, it kind of fades, and we're left with, well, ourselves.
And he realizes that the quiet and the solitude, it hasn't magically solved, his writing problems. And worse, he finds himself actually missing human connection.
It's like we need that balance. Even if we enjoy solitude, too much isolation can be tough.
It's true. And it's here that he has, this pivotal conversation with his yurt landlady. She's described as kind of like this wise surrogate mother figure.
Oh, I like her already.
Right. And she, she listens to his anxieties and she offers some simple but profound advice. She tells him, you will work this out, but it's going to take some time and you have to be okay with that.
That is such good advice. Patience, self-compassion, trusting the process.
Totally. But as he admits, at 21, he wasn't quite ready to embrace that wisdom.
I can understand that. When you're younger, you just want those quick solutions.
He was still fixated on that quick fix. And while browsing a bookstore in town, he stumbles upon, a book about the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, here we go again. Another escape plan.
And just like that, a new plan starts forming in his mind.
From yurts to hiking trails. His search for answers is taking like a physical turn this time.
It is. And I think what's interesting is this time he's not setting out with any grand expectations of finding answers. He's simply going to walk, disconnect, hopefully rediscover the joy of creating.
Sounds like a much healthier approach.
I think so too. And as we'll see, this shift in mindset, it allows him to experience the journey in a completely different way. But we'll have to wait for the next part of our deep dive to learn more about that. So 10 years pass. Our writer's now in his early 30s, and he's managed to, turn his passion for writing into a career. But success, well, it hasn't cured his creative anxieties. After finishing another challenging book project, he finds himself, back in that familiar place, creatively drained, unable to write, and questioning everything.
Sounds like that cyclical nature of creativity. It can be a real challenge,
It can be. And this time, it's not just the writing that's got him down. He's going through what he calls a mild early 30s melancholy episode.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right. He even had a birthday eye exam that sent him spiraling into an existential crisis.
Those milestone birthdays, they can do that to you, make you reassess everything.
It's true. And it's actually a friend who offers the advice that, leads him back to that Appalachian Trail idea.
Okay.
She tells him, you need to go and do something else for a while, something that isn't worrying about work. Otherwise, you're going to break some stuff on the inside permanently.
Solid advice. Sometimes you just need to step away.
Right. So he announces he's going to hike the Appalachian Trail, much to the amusement of his friend who thought he meant something a bit more low-key, like, a weekend at the beach.
From existential dread to the Appalachian Trail, that's quite a jump.
It is. And I think what's interesting is this time he's not setting out with any, grand expectations, He's just going to walk, disconnect, hopefully rediscover the joy of creating.
Sounds like he's approaching this journey with a much healthier mindset.
I agree. And even with weeks of preparation, he vastly overestimated his physical fitness. This is a guy who spends, most of his time sitting at a desk lost in the world of words.
I can imagine those first few miles were a bit of a rude awakening.
They were.
Yeah.
He describes his backpack as feeling like a dead rhino strapped to his back.
Oh.
And his legs are definitely not happy with him.
It's funny how the reality of physical exertion rarely matches our romanticized notions of it.
So true. But despite the aches and pains, he pushes on, drawn by the beauty of the wilderness, that simple rhythm of trail life. He settles into this daily routine, waking up with the sunrise, brewing a strong cup of coffee.
Essential.
Right. He even jokes that he was willing to give up all his other vices, but not his morning coffee. He'd break down his camp, pack up his dead rhino backpack, and set off walking. Usually for several hours before, taking a break for lunch, often enjoying simple meals like instant noodles while taking in, these breathtaking views. Then he'd hike some more, find a new campsite as the sun began to set, and enjoy, the quiet satisfaction of setting up his tent, preparing dinner, settling in for the night.
There's a certain beauty in that simplicity, isn't there? Stripping life back to the essentials.
He definitely seems to find peace in that routine. And something really interesting happens as he embraces this, stripped down existence. He rediscovers the pure joy of reading.
Oh, I love that.
He devours books with, a renewed sense of wonder, describes it as reading like he hadn't since he was, 15.
It's amazing how removing those distractions can help us reconnect with the things we love.
It is. And the books he chooses are pretty eclectic, Steinbeck, M. John Harrison, David Thorne, even A History of Nautical Clocks.
That sounds like a diverse reading list.
Right. It seems he wasn't limiting himself to any particular genre.
A true bookworm.
And it's also worth noting, even though he initially set out to escape, the world of words, he finds solace and inspiration in those very things while on the trail.
Interesting. Sometimes facing the thing that's causing you anxiety, but in a new context, can be helpful.
Yeah, I think so too. And, it's not just the reading that brings him joy on the trail. He also finds himself connecting with other hikers in a way he never expected.
I was going to say, he must have met some interesting characters along the way.
Oh, he did. He talks about how in his, everyday life, he struggles with social anxiety, finds it incredibly draining to meet new people. But on the trail, it was different.
There's something about that shared experience, especially a challenging one, that can create a sense of camaraderie.
It's true, the shared context, the conditions, the common goal, that simple act of like walking in the same direction, it created an instant bond. It was easy to like strike up conversations, form genuine connections, even if they were, fleeting.
Sounds like a crash course in human connection.
It does. And he has some pretty hilarious anecdotes about the people he meets along the way. There's the guy who wears a kilt and shakes his hand while simultaneously peeing.
Okay, that's a visual.
Right. And then there's this Californian gentleman who loves to start his day with a wake and bake session.
I bet they had some interesting conversations.
I know, right? But perhaps his, most heartwarming encounter is with an artist from New York. They bond over their shared love of art, their, mutual disdain for their respective home countries.
Sounds like kindred spirits.
They hike together for a few days, then part ways, assuming, they'll never see each other again. But then a week later, they have this like serendipitous reunion during a snowstorm.
Wow. What are the chances?
I know. They end up doing this joyful reunion dance in the snow, celebrating, that shade sense of relief and camaraderie. It's a reminder that, even in the midst of challenges and uncertainty, there's always room for joy, for connection.
It's beautiful.
It is. And, it's through these encounters, both funny and profound, that he starts to realize that maybe the answer he's been searching for, it isn't about like finding himself in isolation, but it's about connecting with others, embracing that shared human experience.
It challenges that romanticized notion of the solitary artist, finding truth in solitude.
Exactly. But it wasn't like all sunshine and camaraderie on the trail. He did have a few moments of, fear and panic. One day, he got lost after like misreading a trail marker, ended up wandering off the path for hours.
Oh no, getting lost in
Sure.
the wilderness, that can be scary.
It was definitely a wake-up call for him. He describes feeling a sense of panic he hadn't, experienced before, realizing he had no idea how to find his way back. He even started imagining, like, the headlines, "Idiotic Brit skeleton found."
A little dramatic, but I get it.
Right. But eventually, after, a lot of frantic wandering and some creative problem solving, he managed to find his way back, vowing to, never underestimate the importance of clear trail markers again.
A valuable lesson learned for sure.
And it seems like this experience, along with the other challenges he faces on the trail, the physical exertion, the unpredictable weather, the occasional encounter with wildlife, it helps him shift his perspective on like his own creative struggles.
So how does his time on the trail ultimately impact his relationship with writing, with creativity?
Yeah.
Did he find that elusive solution he was looking for?
So after weeks of hiking, immersing himself in that simplicity of trail life, he starts to feel the pull back towards like his real life. He receives news about a family member passing away, and the war in Ukraine weighs heavily on his mind. Being, so far away from home during these events, it brings a new perspective. And he realizes, it's time to return. He hitches a ride back down south, leaving like his temporary hiker identity behind. But here's the thing. He returns home without any, grand epiphanies or profound revelations.
It's like he sets out seeking those answers, but comes back without that singular aha moment. Maybe the shift happens when you let go of those expectations.
I think you're right. It's like by letting go of that need to like fix himself, he actually allowed himself to heal. He describes laying out like his hiking gear in his apartment hallway, almost like a ritual to honor the experience, But he also recognizes that he's still, fundamentally himself, just with a slightly altered perspective.
It's not about becoming a new person, but more about refining who you are.
Exactly. And as he reflects on his experience, he realizes that much of what he was seeking in the wilderness, peace, clarity, purpose, it already existed in his life. It was just obscured by, the noise and distractions of his like everyday routine.
It's so easy to get caught up in that day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture.
It is. This realization leads him to, this pivotal conversation with a friend, and he's talking about his feelings of like disillusionment, the lack of any, profound insights gained. His friend, ever the pragmatist, asks, "So you aren't feeling very inspired, and you can't control when you are. Well, would you want to?"
Wow, what a thought-provoking question.
Right. He realizes that chasing like, constant inspiration and creative output, it's not only unrealistic, but also potentially draining.
It's like trying to force a flower to bloom all year round.
Exactly. It goes against the natural rhythm.
The creative process, much like life, it has its ebbs and flows.
He makes a great analogy. He compares those dormant periods to a computer needing to, like, reset
Yeah.
after being overloaded.
We all need those moments to just recharge.
He talks about a conversation he had with a teenage hiker, and she observed that many people on the trail are, trying to find themselves.
To find themselves.
Yeah. This resonated with him deeply because, the trail didn't give him all the answers, but it did help him, like, let go of that illusion that there's this one singular static version of himself to discover.
We're constantly evolving.
Right, exactly. And upon returning home, he doesn't suddenly become, like, a different person. He still grapples with self-doubt, but he approaches those challenges with, more acceptance, more self-compassion.
Progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And I think that's the essence of this deep dive, isn't it? The answers we seek, whether they're creative or existential, they're rarely found in, these grand gestures or dramatic escapes. They often emerge in the quiet moments, the small shifts, the connections we forge. What do you think? After hearing this story, is there anything, you might change about your own approach to creative challenges?
I think I'd like to be more accepting of those downtimes, those uninspired periods.
Yeah. This deep dive reminds us that the answers, they aren't always found, in a hut in the woods, but in the ongoing exploration of ourselves and the world around us. It's about, embracing the uncertainty and finding joy in the process. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep exploring.